Good Tuesday evening. I'm Chief Meteorologist Emily Walls, and tonight we're going to be focusing in on an update on the Texas flooding that took place, unfortunately, on the 4th of July. We have updated numbers on that, and also I want to talk a little bit more about flash flooding and just how little water it takes to sweep you right off your feet. So it's just going to be a lot of putting this in perspective of what took place in Texas just 5 days ago, and then looking down in the tropics. As of right now, they're fairly quiet, and that's something that we haven't been able to say recently, and I'll show you why that is and just how long it could last. And then here at home, we have occasional showers, thunderstorms. We've had several flood advisories that have been going into effect throughout the afternoon and evening hours, and we still have another flood advisory that was just issued in LaSalle County, so I'm going to be touching on that as well. First, let's dive into the Texas flooding that's taken place. So as of 8 p.m. Central, the latest numbers are still just as devastating as they have been over the last 24 to 36 hours, as we've really been seeing this death toll going up. So now, as of 8 p.m. Central, we are up to 110 people that have been confirmed dead because of that flash flooding that took place. And a lot of these were actually coming out of Kerr County. That was the hardest hit area in central Texas. And 170 people, again, as of 8 p.m. Central, are still considered to be missing or unaccounted for. So those efforts to find people are still underway, and they're going to continue. But, we're 5 days in. So unfortunately, hope for survivors is getting less and less as the days go by. So crews are really working their hardest, and it's just been a really devastating thing to watch unfolding over the last couple of days. Let's talk a little bit more about what happened. So a lot of the devastation was right along the Guadalupe River, and this rose 26 feet in about 45 minutes. So if you figure out what that comes out to, this river was swelling or rising by about 1 foot every 2 to 3 minutes. So if you start thinking about when these flood warnings were coming out, flash flood warnings, flash flood emergencies, when people were finding out that flash flooding was occurring, they had very, very little time to react, because if you think about 26 feet that a river is expanding, think of any of the rivers that we have around here that you know very well. Within 26 feet of that riverbank that you're used to, there's going to be a wall of water coming down that. So unfortunately, it was just pure devastation that we've been seeing coming across areas in central Texas right along the Guadalupe River because of just how quickly that swelled. And the reason for that was because of tropical moisture that was coming in from the remnants of Tropical Storm Barry. So we had these really heavy showers and thunderstorms that were training over the same exact areas. In fact, one portion of Texas in Kerr County, that's the one that I had mentioned that had the highest devastation and the highest death toll. That's because they picked up about 12 to 14 inches of rain over just a couple of hours the last Thursday night going into the early morning hours of Friday, which of course was the 4th of July. And there's more rain expected in portions of Texas, even central Texas, starting again tomorrow. So we're still going to be keeping an eye on that flash flood risk. So let's talk a little bit about flash flooding. So whenever you get flash flood alerts, whether it's a warning or an emergency, you really, really have to take that seriously. And here's why. It doesn't take a lot of water to do a ton of destruction or just sweep you right off your feet. So take a look at this graphic here. Only 6 to 8 inches of water, that's enough to very easily sweep a person away, an average sized person. Of course, it's less than that when you're talking about children. And then when you jump up to an average sized car, that only takes about 12 inches of water to sweep that car away. And go back to that stat that I had just mentioned to you, that Guadalupe River, it was rising 1 foot every 2 to 3 minutes. That's why so many people, unfortunately, were not able to get to higher ground by the time that water came rushing in. And then 18 inches of water, that's enough to sweep away a smaller truck, if not a medium-sized truck. So that just goes to show you the power of water. And that's why we're always saying during flood events, turn around, don't drown. You don't know how deep that water is. And again, it's very, very powerful, especially rushing water. So the 5-day rainfall total in central Texas, you can see that bullseye showing up here. We have all of that orange and magenta and even white shading showing up. So if we zoom things way in, going back to Thursday night and early Friday morning, 14.1 inches of rain have been estimated to have fallen in portions of Kerr County. And again, this is one of the hardest hit areas. So all of that water was pooling down into the riverbanks and then unfortunately rushing downstream. Future precipitation, this is taking us through the rest of today, tomorrow, and then into Thursday for this region. And you'll notice while it's not a ton of rain, it's enough that it can still lead to flash flooding, especially in a location that already has saturated soils because of all of this rain and all the flooding that just occurred. And also a lot of this water, it's still rushing downstream. So while the flash flood risk won't necessarily be in the same exact locations that saw that flash flooding just a couple of days ago, notice the flash flood risk, how it begins to move off toward the east. So from central Texas, moving eastward and then up into places like Arkansas, northern Louisiana, all under a flash flood risk for tomorrow because of showers, thunderstorms, and likely some heavy rain that's going to be coming along with some of those thunderstorms. Let's bounce to the south now and check in on the tropics. This is the first time in a while that I've been able to say that the tropics are quiet. So in the eastern Pacific, so far this season, we've had 6 named storms. So we've already gone up to the letter F when it comes to the named storms that we've had in the eastern Pacific. The latest was Flossie, which, by the way, was the earliest F named storm on record. And also, it's already the second major hurricane that's occurred in 2025. And typically, that doesn't happen until mid-August. So we're running about a month to a month and a half above average. But the reason that we could be seeing a lack of storms across the Atlantic comes down to the Saharan dust. So, of course, this originates in the Saharan desert over in Africa. You have really strong winds that push and pick up that dust and then throws it up into the atmosphere. It travels across the Atlantic, and then eventually, oftentimes, it makes it to the southeastern U.S., if not through the Caribbean, of course, too. So all the locations that you see here on this map that are showing up in this orange shading, that's representing the Saharan dust that's in our atmosphere right now. And that can actually limit tropical storm development, hurricane development, because it's dry, dusty air that's lofted up into the atmosphere. And what do hurricanes and tropical storms need? They need a lot of moisture to work with. And when you have dry and dust in the air, that's just not allowing it to happen. But also, it has strong winds typically. Think about all of that dust coming off of the Saharan desert there. That's being lofted by strong winds. And we don't want strong winds in order to sustain and maintain a tropical storm or a hurricane, because it sort of just rips apart the storm. So within the storm, we have really strong winds, right? Whenever we're talking about a hurricane, you have that flow around the eye, and typically the eye wall is where you have those strongest winds. But if you have shear, which is changing of wind direction and speed with height, if you have different wind speeds in different layers, it's going to tear apart that tropical storm or that hurricane. So oftentimes when you have this setup with Saharan dust that's moving across the Atlantic, you have strong winds with it. And so that's called wind shear. That does not do good things for tropical storms and hurricanes. That's what we don't want as far as development for those systems. So that's why we're seeing that limited. And also, dust scatters sunlight. What do we need to heat up the ocean? Sunlight. And if that's being able to be limited, then the ocean isn't going to be able to warm up quite as fast as it typically does. So these 3 things are the reason that the Saharan dust can actually make a pretty big difference when it comes to the Atlantic hurricane season. But this is more of a seasonal thing that happens typically in spring, early summer, but by late summer and then into the fall, it's not typically as windy over in Africa. So we're not getting quite as much dust being lofted up and then traveling across the ocean, which means more sunlight is going to be able to warm up those sea surface temperatures. We have less wind shear, and then it looks like things are going to be a little bit more favorable. But for the next 7 days, the National Hurricane Center does not have any development taking place in the Atlantic or in the eastern Pacific. So it's expected to stay rather quiet. The radar here at home, we've been tracking showers and thunderstorms throughout the Chicagoland area through the afternoon, the evening hours, and that's going to continue going into tonight, but it's going to be a little bit more on an isolated basis, not so much scattered like what we've been experiencing over the last few hours. If we zoom things into LaSalle County, we're watching a flood advisory that's been issued until 9:30 p.m. This includes places like Peru, Utica, LaSalle, and then that's going to last again until 9:30. After that, this will likely expire. But the reason this was issued is because we had a really strong storm that was hardly moving. It was only going about 10 to 15 miles per hour to the northeast, so it actually dumped close to 2 inches of rainfall across that portion of LaSalle County. And it's not the only location that we had flood advisories today. Over near Valparaiso, we picked up 2 to 3 inches of rain earlier this afternoon. There was a flood advisory in effect earlier for that location as well in central Porter County. Fortunately, that has been able to expire. We also had a flood advisory that was issued across southwestern Cook County, northeastern Will County, where you're seeing some of these pins showing 1 to 2 inches of rain. So fortunately, we've seen a lot of these advisories being able to be expired, but for those of you in LaSalle County, again, that is still remaining in effect until 9:30 p.m. Coming up right after this short break, we are going to talk about the heat because I have 90s returning to my 7-day forecast. Those details coming up in 2 minutes. Welcome back. So yesterday, Monday the 7th, was the first day in 3 weeks that we actually enjoyed a day that was below average when it came to our high temperatures. So if you think back to the last couple of weeks, it's been very hot. We've been dealing with temperatures that have been well into the 80s, if not in the 90s. Of course, we had that heat wave at the end of June, leading into early July. And it looks like we could be seeing some 90-degree days coming back in by the end of this week. Take a look at the 5-day forecast. Near normal expected Wednesday and Thursday. That's going to put us right in the mid-80s. And the humidity, that's not going to be all that high. So tomorrow, I think we keep that humidity in check. It should be feeling like the mid-80s as well. But then by the end of this week, going into Friday, high temperatures are expected to be near 90. That humidity, that's going to come rushing back in. And also, we're going to have another wave of showers and thunderstorms being likely Friday evening, Friday night. That's going to linger into Saturday as well. That's all associated with a cold front. So your temperature outlook, this is from the 14th through the 18th. So that's Monday through Friday of next work week. And you'll notice that throughout the Chicagoland area, we're still expected to be warmer than average. That's what these colors are representing. So we have favored warmer than average temperatures that will likely continue into next week as well. For tonight, upper 60s expected. The humidity, it's still kind of up there. We have dew point temps that are in the 60s, so it's not feeling quite as refreshing as what we were experiencing last night. So kind of keep that in mind if you're hoping to keep the windows open tonight. 3-day forecast, mid-80s tomorrow, 90s expected by Friday. We'll have showers, thunderstorms moving through, especially in the afternoon, the evening hours. And this could be a good soaker across the area Friday night and then going into Saturday, which, by the way, is a very wonderful thing because we still have drought conditions across much of the Chicagoland area. Now, this isn't the only 90-degree day that I have in my 7-day forecast. Those details and more, of course, coming up on the news at 9 p.m. We'll see you soon.